before they die, but oh, and EffOrt needlessly losing some lurkers there. Not very good. Fantasy sieging up, and this is what I said we needed to see here. This is what Fantasy has to worry about here is a counterattack. I'm assuming that he has enough tanks hopefully back at his base. He doesn't have a whole lot of science vessels either. But if you're looking right now, they are not that different. Fantasy and EffOrt are actually very close in food count here. In fact, at this point, Fantasy is actually higher than EffOrt in food count, and the swarm is going to come in here. We're going to see if Fantasy can get out of this. Not the best swarm, a great matrix. That tank is going to go down very quickly, but enough medic marines to hold this back and a tank in the back with some reinforcing tanks, I'm assuming, coming up here, as well as some vultures going to help out. EffOrt is not looking too confident here, and he is looking like he is about to get contained in his own base. He's getting shelled on right now, and the splash damage, of course, does still do damage in Swarm. The problem is Fantasy needs to get more units. That is his problem. You got to move those Marines out, losing a lot of units here. Great swarms coming down, and Fantasy is going to have to back up. Is he going to save that tank? No, he's not. I'm wondering where all the rest of the units are for Fantasy. I don't know if he's been just focusing on SCV production here. That was his chance, and I fear that Fantasy lost that chance now. He was able to keep EffOrt from expanding, which was great. But Fantasy does not have a lot of units out on the map. I mean, even if he does have more as far as the food count's concerned right now, I think a lot of it is, as you see there, is the trying to really saturate that base. And you can tell that. I mean, Fantasy just spent a whole lot of money. Here come the science vessels. If Fantasy can get this macro going, if Fantasy can get these units out on the field and protect his expansion, their mines are out as well. So Fantasy spent that time sitting outside of EffOrt's base. Oh, a great mine there to basically get teched up. Is that going to be enough, though? Is Fantasy going to focus so much on tech that he's not going to be able to defend this? He is not going to be able to defend this right now. Not enough tanks. Fantasy going to be able to take out the base, but this is not an even trade. Fantasy needs this secondary right now. He's going to be able to go in. He should be splitting his army right now. That base is completely defenseless. Not enough here. No tanks at all to defend. And Fantasy is going to come very close to losing a secondary, losing a ton of SCVs there. I think a error by Fantasy, although a lot of irradiates coming out. Oh, just moving in his Marines to just completely die there. His Marines basically had a rally point set. Is Fantasy going to be able to defend this with a bunker? He does have a couple Marines in that bunker. And it looks like Fantasy is going to be able to barely defend that. But Fantasy just not microing well enough out of these swarms. Fantasy, you're losing almost your entire army. Fantasy is losing almost his entire medic marine army because he is not paying attention. And that could be the game right there. Oh, God, Fantasy, why? Oh, that was so not cool, bro. So not cool. Fantasy depresses me, man. He's a kid with so much talent. But I just feel like he doesn't always tap into that talent. Fantasy is getting overrun at both of his expansions now. He doesn't have a whole lot of money in the bank. EffOrt is running completely strong. Tons of money in the bank. Able to keep building units. Zergling's going around to attack the main base of Fantasy right now. Zergling's going to be able to go around there. It doesn't look like they did a whole lot at this time, but just running in essentially. Fantasy finally getting a tank up. If Fantasy can hold off these attacks with... Oh, wow. Actually, a lot of Scourge that are wasted on one science vessel. I think it's 4 or 5. But Fantasy does not have the units to keep this up. I actually expect to see a GG fairly quickly. You're not going to win this game with pure science vessels. Meanwhile, EffOrt can continue to just keep pumping out Zerglings, and EffOrt does have the economic advantage right now. He has an Ultraless Cavern as well. Fantasy is losing out on this game, even if he has managed to maintain his lead as far as the food count goes. I think that has been a lot of SCVs. And so, and losing another science vessel. Fantasy cannot lose science vessels, but he just does not have enough units here. Unless he's, and a great play going off as well. So those science vessels are going to pop any moment, throwing down a last-minute swarm. Fantasy. I'm hoping for a miracle. I'm hoping he has a random place with tons of units saved up that he can just push out with 5 tanks and a bunch of medic marines, but I don't think that's going to happen. Here is a very small force of marines with no medics. Half of the science vessels are plagued, losing that medic marine force, and I think we are coming close to the final attack here. And I am afraid that Fantasy is most likely going to lose out of the OSL, meaning that he is going to lose this game. He is going to go 1-2, and then EffOrt is going to go 1-2. So EffOrt getting a needless victory, other to say that he smashed Fantasy. And we now see 4 bases, 5 bases currently for EffOrt. 4 of those bases are mining, and the 5th one will be mining fairly quickly here. Coming in with a great sniping Mutalisk. But no, Fantasy is pushing out. Am I going to eat my words here? Is Fantasy going to be able to take out another expansion without getting completely counterattacked? No! There's a huge counterattack coming. Oh my god! And the Mutalisk! Hero Mutalisk with 4 kills, taking out Fantasy Sides Vessel. There's another one. 5 kills for the Mutalisk. And a big group coming in here, taking out Fantasy Secondary again, taking out SCVs. SCVs having to retreat back to the main base. And there was a glimmer of hope for Fantasy, I think. But I think that glimmer of hope is gone now. The streaming down Zerglings are going to be able to take out the secondary expansion here, start killing even more SCVs, and I think we're going to see the GG at any point here. Fantasy, oh my god, losing all but 1 science vessel, and he is out. You can see him choking up on his giant Adam's apple there as he is facing defeat here in this round of 16 OSL. A failed drop, not going to be able to do anything, and 1 tank that is going to almost go down momentarily. And, you know, Fantasy, oh, that's it right there. That's game. I don't know if you guys can hear the cheering. Fantasy should really GG at this point. There's nothing he can do to save himself from this. I hate being such a downer. I really wanted Fantasy to win, but EffOrt just showed his prowess, showed what a strong Zerg player he is in this matchup. Really just kept control the entire game. Only allowed Fantasy. There's the GG from Fantasy. Fantasy out of the OSL, man. That has got to be killer. This is a heartbreak game on Heartbreak Ridge. You know he's feeling the emotions welling up right now. Man, that is a rough, rough loss. I hope you're happy with yourself, EffOrt. You're still losing, and you beat freaking Fantasy. He was trying to go for his gold, trying to go for 3rd time's a charm, and EffOrt destroyed him. Poor Fantasy. Fantasy, you can come to my house and eat some ice cream, and we can watch some of your classic winning games. Oh, man, that's tough. EffOrt's not even happy about it. We'll see you in the next game, guys. I'm depressed.